Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Kelly Driscoll. In this episode, you'll hear part 2 of my conversation with Christa Matlack, Career Coach STEM at Bucknell University. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholars Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app.
I was curious if there's some elements, in how the ePortfolios are being introduced, or maybe even how some of the content is being framed by the students that's specific to STEM experiences or communicating who they are and the skills that they've gained specifically towards STEM. Could you share, if, I don't know if it is or if it's more broad, what that might look like for those that are thinking about it?
Yeah, so right now it's just very broad. So the career course one and the My Career Journey is geared towards a very broad, overarching career readiness concept. But I have been working on more industry-specific templates. I just haven't been able to finish them. So there is one that's geared towards more of let's explore the STEM industry because this is where we want to focus our time. And so I have a rough draft of something put together, but then it's figuring out how do we incorporate this and how do we get it out to students and get students using it. But it does link in a little bit more of our STEM career community resources that we're developing in our office to help them explore specific science, technology, engineering, and math career paths. And then it still then starts, okay, if we picked these 3 different types of jobs, starting to envision a 5-year plan of if I do this, what do I have to do in the next 5 years to get there? And so really starting to plan out, like maybe it's grad school. Maybe there's like, this is what I have to do the next couple years to get myself to grad school to be able to get to this job. And so it's designed a little bit more for the juniors and seniors. And what the idea is to align it with our 6 career communities, which are all aligned with different industry areas. So mine would specifically geared towards STEM and exploring their career journey in STEM and potentially envisioning their future in that industry area.
Nice. And I was kind of curious, related to that, you've only been doing this for 2 years and have made so much progress and had such wonderful results based on what I've seen in your institution's portfolio directory for those that have been shared publicly. What are some things that you're envisioning maybe for this next year, or if you thought even more forward, what some of those next steps might be?
Yeah, I think we've already implemented some changes in the Jumpstart course to shift from while they're going to create a learning ePortfolio, we've added a final project of a showcase ePortfolio. So something that students could use, a tangible item they can use for networking purposes. So we have already started to make changes. So we have a template for a showcase ePortfolio. So the students will leave the course not only with a resume, a cover letter, LinkedIn profile, but now also a showcase ePortfolio that they're going to work on building at least one experience into that during our course. And the hope is you already have it now. So just add to it, right? Add a couple more experiences in here and, start using it when you email networking connections now, or are having networking conversations. And so that's one change we've already made. And I think, the envision for the future is, can we develop the career, like the industry specific templates, and start to find a way to push these out to students too, as a thing that they can use to, again, not only explore these career options, but start planning their future. And then we're even putting like a career toolbox in there where they can track networking interactions or track and reflect upon interviews that they've had. So that way they can go back, like after you've had 5 interviews, to try to remember, what happened and how you were feeling. Like it's a space for them to do that as well. So when it comes time to, I've had 3 offers on the table, I don't remember any of the interviews and what I felt. So let's go back and look at this.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's a really important conversation. Very often working with institutions that may be new to the whole idea of ePortfolio, they feel like they kind of have to make a choice about whether they're going to be, communicating to students about the value of the kind of learning portfolio versus, maybe right from the get-go, these really need to be polished and ready to share with outside audiences. And our position has always been that the institution can really embrace both for the benefit of the students and to create tools that make it very easy for them to move things around and repurpose things, hop into the organizer and drag and drop things from course portfolios or specific internship portfolios that they have, so that they can really kind of curate whatever experiences and skills that they have to different audiences, and maybe even create different versions of this kind of showcase portfolio for very specific kinds of jobs that they may be applying to. The way that you were probably framing who you are and what you've done when you first got out of school. You mentioned that you were applying to some positions that were related to soccer, but you were also pursuing some things related to science, and it's a very different story that you might tell. So we've always wanted students to know that they could create, as many kind of versions and presentations of who they are and what they've done to share with specific people. So it's wonderful to hear that Bucknell is already kind of priming students for understanding the value in both and getting introduced to how both can support them in their career, and that they can make choices about, what part of their learning journeys, even maybe the challenging experiences that they had, or, when things got messy and when they needed to pivot, that these stories are still extremely valuable for those that are outside the institution that are thinking about how they might fit into their organization's culture. And, we always value people that have, gone through challenges and persevered and learned from those and took next steps. So I think that's wonderful that you're even thinking about having students just reflecting on some of those interview experiences, because they can be very telling. And, in the moment, you can be so kind of energized and talking so much that, it's important to just kind of sit down and breathe and think about, what were some of the things that were said that resonated with me, or, where did I feel pushed back? And whether when those offers can come in, they can make, more informed decisions. Or if they keep kind of encountering conversations that aren't a good fit, maybe that they need to be looking for something else. So that's fantastic. And I was kind of curious, for you, with your background in sports and coaching, are there certain kinds of maybe practices or methodologies where you can find some common ground in the way that you communicate with students that might have been taking place on the field that just feels really familiar when you're working with students within these new realms?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely transferable skills, right? Now I'm not coaching. Like, it used to be, the content that I was coaching was very soccer specific, right? It was all about improving their soccer skills and breaking it down for them in a way that they can understand, so they can kick the ball the right way, or, move in the right position on the field, make the right run, all of that stuff. But, now it's just shifted to, trusting yourself, like teaching them how to trust themselves and their skills and abilities and to have confidence in it. That confidence piece is definitely a huge transfer, that teaching them that they have the skills and abilities. I did that in soccer and in career coaching. And talking to them about their strengths and ways that they can improve things. Like now it's improving their resume, improving their cover letter, improving how they phrase things, So there's definitely a lot of that, transferability from coaching soccer to coaching career. But I think the biggest thing is it's really empowering them, right? And encouraging them and letting them know, like developing that really foundation of trust, right? With the student, that I'm here to help you. I understand what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and I'm here to try to coach you on how to improve in your career journey. And that could be from just trying to give them less anxiety about which career they should pursue or what they should do. We have students come in so anxious about, which student organizations should I join? And it's like, just try some out, right? Like it's okay. It doesn't matter at the end of the day which ones. They have to be ones that are meaningful to you, that you're going to contribute and make an impact, because otherwise it just becomes a bullet point on your resume. It's just a line, and there's no way to tell a story about that. It's just, I was a member of this group. Well, instead of being a member of 6 groups, maybe you're only a member of 3 and you're really heavily involved in them. And just talking to them more about, like you had said earlier, living in the moment and enjoying what you're doing and making sure that you're passionate about what you're doing. Because if you're not, right, it's never going to align with you and your interests, and you're just never going to be satisfied with it. You're always just going to be a little bit unhappy with it. So there's definitely a lot of that that is transferred over into career coaching, and it's very interesting to see. And I think it's helped me, right, to be able to coach on the soccer field, and then now coach one-on-one appointments or in a classroom being an instructor.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, I know in my experience teaching that, especially in undergrad, I would sometimes have encounters with students where they really felt like they didn't have any skill gaps or, anything that was gonna, and so undecided about what their interests were and what they wanted to do. Maybe they'd just been kind of following what their parents had told them to do. When you're, and I imagine you meet with students like that sometimes too. Yeah. What are some things that you might communicate to them to, kind of give them that coaching to maybe think about themselves in a different light?
Yeah. I think when students come in and they feel kind of lost, like they don't know either what major they want to choose, or they don't know which career path they want to go down. I guess my go-to is that, like, you don't have to know. Like I'm mid-career and I don't know what I want to do when I grow up either, right? Like I might change my mind 5 years from now. I don't know. There's always going to be uncertainty in career, right? You may find the perfect job, but the chances are it's not going to be your first job. Your first job's usually never your last job. So just shifting their mindset from the anxiety of having to select something to knowing that, one, it's not linked, right? Your major is not linked to what you do, but 2, that you just look at it as there's no wrong decision to make in your career, right? You just have to learn something every time you switch jobs, right? So either you learn what you like or you learn what you don't like, and you use that to pivot you in the right direction towards something that's going to be more meaningful to you at the end of the day. And so, to just not feel like you have to stay somewhere, and that you have to understand yourself and really listen to yourself And if you're feeling unhappy, what's causing that? So then when I look for my next job, it's something that's not going to bring those same feelings of unhappiness. I don't want to put myself back in the same environment if I know that environment's not for me already. So really just teaching them and coaching them to trust their gut at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's important. And as you're speaking, I was also thinking about, for maybe some of the students that are coming to Bucknell that have already maybe been out in the field and are now coming back to either pursue a different degree, or maybe they have been working for a while and want to, maybe they never finished college and are coming back. So for more of those adult students that have work experience, what kind of coaching might you give them in using ePortfolios and reflecting on their experiences that might pull in more elements of prior learning, or, how to incorporate what they've done previously and what they're now doing in their courses? Because I can imagine that there's some older students that are coming back into the fold also.
Yeah, there are some non-traditional students that are returning. Either they've worked or they decided to work before they wanted to go get a degree. So we do have some students like that. And when they come in, and we have grad students, right, that maybe worked before they got their master's. So I have met with some grad students as well. So when they come in, it's really talking to them about, what did you do and how can we connect it, right, to what you're doing now, or where do you want to go? And showing them that what they did and the path they chose is unique to them, and being able to tell their unique story from their perspective, right? And they may not, some of them may not understand really the value of that experience that they have already under their belt, and how it's going to help them when it comes to, post-graduation job search and all of that stuff. So really talking to them in depth about what they learned, what skills they got, what they did, and making sure that they know how to articulate the value of what they did in this new context of where they want to go. Because sometimes it's totally unrelated, right? Sometimes they have experience doing one thing and they want to now get their degree and go in a different direction. And it's helping them connect the dots and understand that it's not always about the company and the position you were in. It's about the transferable skills that you got that you can still use and leverage in this new field. But at the end of the day, communicating with them might be a little bit different because they've already gone through a little bit of a job search process. A lot of times it might be a little bit more of, okay, like, how is this even relevant? Just trying to talk them through that it still could be relevant, and it's still probably something you should keep on your resume or keep in your ePortfolio because it's part of your unique story that you want people to understand about you. And really giving them that ownership to put that in there if they want it in there, if they want to highlight that experience, or if they don't and they want to start from scratch, okay, now what do we got to do if we're starting over? If you don't want that in there, we have to revisit, what coursework have you done? What labs have you done? What stuff can we build you up? And if you don't want that to be a defining characteristic on your ePortfolio or your resume.
Yeah. Oh, and that's a good point too. If crafting your narrative, right? And, what part of that prior experience that they feel like they even want to be part of their story anymore. So thank you for mentioning that too. And I was thinking about also, as you're kind of supporting students in this process, I imagine you're also kind of putting on the hat as the individual that might be the audience for these ePortfolios. So whether they're going to potentially be using them to get internships or try to get their foot in the door at one of these companies that you mentioned that they really want to work in. What's kind of informing your process about what kinds of content they may want to include alongside, listing some of the highlights of what their skills are, because it is such a different medium than the traditional resume, where you can just kind of, it's very flat, right?
Yeah.
You can do those things. But how are you kind of coaching the students in, okay, you've made this claim that you have this skill. How do you kind of take them from that point to maybe, what kind of project or experience that they might want to share to kind of back up that claim?
Yes. Yeah. So we talk a lot about using the STAR method to really craft and draw that connection between I have this teamwork experience and I need to tell you about a time when I got it, right? So really using that format of, what's the situation, what task, what were you tasked with, what was your action, and then what was the result, but also relating it back. So if we're going to tailor that ePortfolio to a specific, because we had mentioned before, you could make small versions of it per employer. If you want to tailor it specifically to an employer or a position that you're applying to forward on with your resume, relate it back to the company's mission, vision, values, relate it back to the position description and show them and demonstrate to them that this experience over here is very relevant and will give me the skills to help you here in your company. And talking to them and breaking down that STAR method for them so they can start to really reflect on and describe how they got that skill and how they're going to apply that skill at this new company in this new role. And that's kind of, but then it's like you have to pick and choose which ones are the most relevant. So then it goes back to what's your job that you're applying to, and does my research experience better demonstrate it than this internship that I did? And trying to, curate their story to give them skills, but also like give them something interesting, right? Like you don't want everything to just be all engineering on your resume. Like they know you're a great engineer on your resume, right? So maybe the ePortfolio, we're going to have some of that stuff, but like, let's tell a little bit different story about more of who you are. Like instead of just a one-liner about this club you're in that you did a lot of stuff for, but you didn't have room to explain it, maybe we pick that to really talk about your event planning or your supervision of other individuals, and thinking about ways that you can make yourself like more three-dimensional, like a more whole person by using that ePortfolio to tell more of your story, not just what's on paper, because they already saw the paper. They already understand that. So trying to find different unique experiences in that ePortfolio, but also, like you said, supporting them. Do you have pictures of the events that you planned? Do you have pictures of your project, of that thing you created in your engineering course that you can show the process you went through to start from here's my sketch to here's the end product? Like, can you show that progression that you went through and demonstrate that you know what the design process takes and how it works? And iterations, like that's a lot of the stuff that, they could put in an ePortfolio that you can't really put on a resume other than writing one short bullet point statement about.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I do, that really resonates a lot with how we approach the tools that we're creating too. We want to have it as a space where individuals can really use it as that creation space. So not just, housing files, of course you can upload documents, but really using it as a place where you can go deeper and create almost this kind of more three-dimensional presentation of who you are. And related to that, so there've been more and more research around whether, people that are making hiring decisions are interested in viewing ePortfolios. And I was curious from your perspective, if, the world could move in that direction, how you might hope that this kind of technology could be incorporated into the kind of hiring process, maybe at what stage or how it might be viewed, or maybe even for some of the organizations that are recruiting from your institution, how might they be involved in viewing some of those ePortfolios? I'd love to hear your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I think right now, obviously there are industries like education where, the e-portfolio plays a huge role, and they still do the paper portfolios, which are those massive binders
Oh
that
yeah,
are like
I
this
know
big.
as well.
um, so, I think the e-portfolio has totally transformed education's use of portfolios, and has made it more accessible, right? It's made it very much more accessible for the students to share what they've done with those search committees and with the people that they're meeting with. And, I think it would be really nice to see that transfer into the other industry areas, right? Like that is a very niche place where it's being utilized heavily. I know that in the creative arts and like graphic design and stuff like that it is, but it's really like you said, when do we introduce it? Because it can be a lot of information, right? And information overload. So sometimes it's hard to know, like, when should that be put, into the hiring process, at what point. We talk to students about the possibility, like, what are the possibilities I could do if I create one of these? How could I potentially use it in my hiring process? One thing that some of the education students they're putting a QR code on their resume. So when they apply, it's just right there, right? So why can't an engineering student do that? And then it's at the mercy of the employer. If they want to look at it, here's more for you. I want to give you more of my story, and this is how I'm going to do it. Other ways that they could potentially use it is maybe in an interview setting, right? Like, have a business card with a QR code on it there. And, oh, I have a really great project and I do actually have it on my ePortfolio. Here's a QR code if you want to take a look while I'm kind of answering your question here. There are ways that I think they could get really creative of, like, how do I insert this ePortfolio? And then they're still walking away with your ePortfolio because they have the business card, right? So
they can
even
spend
if
more
they
time
don't
with
read
you.
it, yeah. And they have a takeaway, right? That they can, maybe they're not looking at the entire thing right there and reading it word for word, but maybe later on after they're done, they're like, that's really interesting. Kind of want to see more of what this person has done. And it gives you that opportunity to share that with them. And so I think there are definitely ways that students could find to weave it in, like, other than networking. Like, networking seems to make the most sense, right? Of, here's more. I'd love to, like, show you my ePortfolio and, like, have a conversation about who I am and, like, how I could potentially fit in the company. And sharing it that way makes the most sense, I think, for most people. But there are other creative ways, even sending your thank you emails and putting the link to it in your signature line. Finding ways that you're still getting it out there and potentially getting views. But will it get to that point? I have no idea. I think it would be really nice to start allowing that to be an option, right? Because I think it does tell you more about the person than a one-page resume can at times, because of the ability of them to curate who they are in a more visual form.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Christa, we're getting close to the end of our time today, but I had a question that's kind of been moving around in my head, kind of going back to your experiences on the soccer field and then what you're doing now. I know from my background in playing sports is that feeling you get when you've got a win.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, in your experiences today, are there certain times where you might be coming home and thinking, I had a win today? And if you could describe maybe some things that have led to that feeling, maybe how that feeling may come out in some of the work that you're doing with students.
Yeah, I think majority of those wins come in the one-on-one appointments, especially when they're students that have met with me multiple times. For example, I'm sure she won't mind me sharing, but I had a student come in and we have been working all summer on a personal statement for graduate school. And she came in very stressed out. Her word count was like almost 300 above what it needed to be. And so she was feeling very stressed about it, right? But we spent a lot of time going through rephrasing, cutting things, figuring out, what is the main points we're trying to get across, and is there stuff we can trim down on or rephrase? And we got it down to about, 50 words over the limit. So she was ecstatic. She was like, "Oh, we did a great job today. This is awesome. I'm so glad that I started working with you on this earlier." And just the excitement in her voice and just feeling that rewarding, like I did help this person, right? I helped her get closer to her goal of finishing her personal statement for this graduate program. And another example is I had a student come in very anxious, doesn't know what she wants to do. She's a senior. And just talking to her and having that real communication of, it's okay. We'll figure it out. We'll find you your first stop, but no, it's not your last stop. Like you're going to find, you just have to try something. And then the nice thing is once you have that job, it makes looking for another job a lot easier because the pressure's off at that point. And I said, are you feeling okay? Like at the end of the appointment, she said, "I always feel better when I leave here." And when they say those things, like, it just it touches you. And those are the wins that I see now, is knowing that they're leaving my office feeling so much better than when they came in.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Christa. It was wonderful to talk to you and learn more about you and hear from your experience and insights. I'm really looking forward to sharing this with our community of listeners.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was awesome. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to meet you and talk to you, Kelly.
Good. Thank you so much. Take good care.
You too.
Bye.
Coming up next, we'll be chatting with Rebecca Thomas, Director of the Pathways ePortfolio program and Adjunct Assistant Professor of the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department at Bucknell University. Here's a quick preview.
I do hope, though, that being exposed to this, more students will be prepared to take on these problems, because I think that's a big part of the issue is in the past and, even kind of right now, a lot of students, right, who are just prepared with a very technical focus, don't have the kind of preparation they need to make solving these kind of problems even a possibility, right?